Alright, yeah, welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and we're going in for a best of 3 deck, and something a bit unorthodox for most best of 3 decks. We're actually going to be playing an aggro deck, which is not something I do very often, but, you know, with the nature of the metagame not really settled, we're not really sure what tier 1 looks like at the moment, except for the old decks, you know. Basically, I just want to make sure that my opponents never get to actually pull off their game plan. So yeah, let's just kill them as quickly as possible, and we're going to be doing that with Gobbo Swarm. So this is a Cavalcade of Calamity deck. This is the build around card, 1 and a red, enchantment, whenever a creature you control with power 1 or less attacks, Cavalcade of Calamity deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. So basically, we are 1 power tribal, so we are running all of the cards that generate 1 power creatures quite effectively. So in the new War of the Sparks set, we got Krenko Tin Street Kingpin, so I've been looking for a nice place to put him, and obviously a Calamity deck seems like the best place to put him. 3 mana 1/2, it says whenever he attacks, put a 1/1 counter on him. So he'll trigger the first time on the Calamity, but the next time he won't. However, when you put the counters on him, you then create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to Krenko's power. So those goblins that he produces will then actually trigger Cavalcade of Calamity, which means this will get progressively bigger and bigger, worse and worse for our opponent as the time goes on. So this is kind of our late game card. If it can survive long enough anyway, it should be able to close out the game. We're also running Goblin Gathering as well for roughly the same reason. 3 mana sorcery creates 2 1/1 goblin creature tokens equal to 2 plus the number of cards named Goblin Gathering in your graveyard. So the first one will generate 2 goblins, next one 3, next one 4, next one 5. So 5 goblins for 3 mana is pretty decent. We only have to do the first one and lose out on value essentially. The second, third and fourth will be pretty good value in the end. So we're running in the bottom end Fanatical Firebrand and Skirt Prospector, 2 of the 1-drop goblins that work quite well. Skirt Prospector in particular is very useful because he allows us to sacrifice a goblin to add red mana. That's why we're going very goblin tribal with this list, because it does allow us to pump out a little bit of extra mana and empty our hand quite quickly, which is pretty important in this deck. We're running 20 mountains, so it's kind of difficult for us to empty our hand out without either Skirt Prospector or everybody's favourite Runaway Steamkin. So this is a 1/1, so it will trigger off Calamity. If we do stack our triggers and our spells correctly, we can pump it into a 2/2 or anything like that later down the line. But honestly, if it's getting pumped up into a 4/4, it's still doing as much damage as it would do with the Calamity trigger anyway, so we're not really fussed that this is getting pumped up, and if it does get pumped up, we get to remove 3 counters from it to add 3 mana, which is right at the top of that curve. It just means that pretty much anything, literally everything in our deck, should I say, is castable off of a Steamkin trigger right there. To refuel, we're using the Flame of Keld. It's also really good with the Cavalcade of Calamity. So 2 mana for an enchantment that says discard your hand, so we want to get empty-handed before we cast this spell, or at least not worry about the cards that we're losing. Chapter 2 allows us to draw 2 cards, so the turn after this comes down we will have 3 cards in hand, and we want to be trying to empty that hand out as quickly as possible, because when Chapter 3 rolls around, it says whenever a red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player this turn, it deals that much damage plus 2 to that permanent or player instead. So automatically the downside of running 1 power creatures is gone off of the Chapter 3 right here, because it means all of our 1/1s are now dealing 3 damage each, and, you know, 4 damage for Legion Warboss, that kind of thing. It's really nice, as well with the shocks dealing 4 damage to clear the way. But in addition to the extra damage off of our creatures, we also get a trigger from Cavalcade of Calamity, because this is a red source, and if it would deal damage, it deals 2 more instead, which means for each 1/1 we are attacking with, Cavalcade of Calamity is lightning striking our opponent. 3 damage for each attack trigger off of Calamity. We could be doing this for up to 4 or 5 as probably an average, which is a lot of damage to push through. It's very nice indeed. The rest of the deck pretty much speaks for itself. We've got Light Up the Stage here as well, just to increase our odds of having nice land draws as well, because if mono red uses Light Up the Stage to hit the land drops every time, we're going to do the same thing. 3 mana, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn you may play those cards, so they don't get discarded with Flame of the Keld, which is quite nice. And if we've dealt damage this turn as well, it triggers Spectacle, which means we can cast this for 1 mana instead, so really working well with our mana cost. We can actually put this card right over here, and this is exactly what the the curve looks like. Really nice and cheap. Plays very well into our 20 mountains here. So that's the game plan anyway. So we're built for a very quick game, essentially, a quick combo-y game. So how do we actually go into the sideboard? Well, we have a few little tricks here to go a little bit longer if we want, or even push it a little bit shorter if we need to as well. We've got Heartfires, which we can use to sacrifice creatures, or even planeswalkers, because we are running Tibalt and Chandra in the sideboard as well. So if they would die from blocks, we could actually just sacrifice them in response to Goblin Grenade our opponent over the top. The sideboard is quite experimental, as is the case pretty much with an unsolved metagame. It's kind of just pointing little things here. It's mostly testing, to be honest, so not all of these cards are subject to be perfect here. They might actually just want to be changed, but I'm trying out Heartfire because I think it's going to be quite useful. You know, we have a lot of 1/1s that can't really push through our opponent's blockers, so I'm using this to get the Cavalcade trigger and then push right over the top. It's also nice as kind of a lava coil effect to deal 4 damage to creatures. Things like Feather, as an example, comes to mind. We can fire Heartfire off of that to kill it, and also hit Planeswalkers if it comes to it as well. A lot of these uncommon Planeswalkers will minus below 4 damage potential anyway, so we could kill those that way as well. Got a Lightning Strike in here just in case it comes in use. I'm not sure what this actually wants to be. It's probably not going to be Lightning Strike in the end, but there you go. Sorcerer's Spyglass to name any problem cards, Maze of Iths and Teferis and things like that. Just basically cut off the activated abilities, so even Search for a Scanter if you're playing up against something like Simic Nexus, which I don't think we have a particularly good game against. If we can race them quick enough, then so be it, but it's probably going to be a bit of an issue, but we would bring in Sorcerer's Spyglass against that matchup. Chain Whirler, if in case we're kind of against a mirror of sorts. A lot of 1/1s on our opposing player's side is not really good for us, so just a Chain Whirler is pretty nice. Tibalt against life gain, 3 mana for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. Passive says that they can't gain life, which is very bad for us. If they get like a Lyra on turn 5, we want to be able to completely negate that by playing Tibalt, so that we can swing right through it and not give our opponent 5 life on a first strike block. And he also does some -2 as well to make some 1/1s, which trigger off the Calamity quite nicely, so he's kind of built for this deck in a nutshell. We also have Chandra Fire Artisan and 2 Experimental Frenzies here, because I'm hearing a lot of chatter about Chandra being the new Experimental Frenzy. I've not really had much luck with Experimental Frenzy, so I'm more than happy to try it out. Either way, I think we want 4 copies of one of these effects, because this is our way of going into the long game. So Chandra Fire Artisan is a 4 mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker. Says whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are removed from Chandra, she deals that much damage to target opponent or planeswalker. So if our opponent's using damage-based or creature-based removal to take care of our planeswalkers, then we're getting some guaranteed damage. That's about 5 damage that Chandra puts out on her own. The only downside is that she can get Vraska's Contempted and Elder Spelled and whatever out of the game, and it won't deal that damage, but that's our opponent dealing with something in the late game that maybe we're not too fussed about. She also has a +1 here, which is the Experimental Frenzy-esque kind of ability. We get to exile the top card of our library, and we get to play it this turn. So if it's a land, we can actually make our land drop off of Chandra, so we have to remember that when we do end up playing her. But other than that, though, we can use it just to keep pumping through our deck. She's effectively the second card per turn drawn with that +1. Her -7 as well is nothing to stick your nose up at. Exile the top 7 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. So you should also note as well her passive plays into her -7, because it says whenever they're removed from Chandra, it doesn't actually specify how they're removed. So if we actually ultimate Chandra, we will deal 7 damage, exile 7 cards from our library, and get to play them this turn. It's not going to be too great as far as playing the spells, but the actual deal 7 damage should be enough to close out the game. And Experimental Frenzy, I'm sure most of you are already aware of at this point. It's a 4 mana enchantment. You get to look at the top card of your library at any time, play it, and you can't play cards from your hand, so you know, it plays into Flame of Keld quite nicely, to be honest, because the downside on the Flame of Keld just is no longer there with the Experimental Frenzy, so we can keep playing these spells over and over again, don't really care what's in hand. And yeah, if we just like get the Flame of Keld to chapter 3, then the downside of Experimental Frenzy not allowing us to play cards from hand really is just lost on us. And even if they deal with the Experimental Frenzy, we'll have drawn enough cards by that point that, you know, once it's gone, we'll just be full of gas in our hand as well. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation for our opponent there. And you can pay 4 to destroy it so that we can actually interact with our hand if we maybe want to close out the game with a shock or a hasty war boss or anything like that. But yeah, that's essentially the deck, guys. I hope you enjoy this one. It's probably going to have a lot of quick games, win or lose anyway. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the meta is going to look like right now, so I'm kind of struggling for deck ideas at this point. I'm not sure what is going to be good at winning, you know, so apologies for the lack of content over the past few days, because I have been testing out a few decks just to see what sticks, and honestly I've been struggling a little bit in that regard. I'm not sure if I'm just getting unlucky or if the decks that I'm building are bad, but yeah, I don't really want to push out bad content for you guys, so I'd rather not make videos at all than pull crap content for you guys to watch or fabricate wins that aren't deserved, you know. So I hope you guys understand, but yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one as well. So if you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe as well for some more content in the future, and make sure to hit that bell icon as well, so if I do go on these hiatuses, you'll get to know when I am back and making videos for you guys once again. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one, and I will see you all in the games. Bye bye.